Hi, I've been writing songs since I was in junior high school, and when I decided that I wanted to study Japanese and live in Japan, which I decided just before going to university, I went into it with the goal of one day being able to write lyrics in Japanese as well. I've now been writing songs and poems in Japanese for almost 10 years, and I want to share with you some of the things that I did that helped me to do that and also gave me a more native understanding of the language. I think these things can be applied to anyone studying Japanese, but will especially be effective for anyone who wants to write in Japanese creatively, whether that be songs or poems, or maybe a video vlog or blog, or even just social media posts. Basically, this is how to fill in the gaps when trying to study from a textbook or language class. These things will work best if you're already at an intermediate level and have a basic understanding of Japanese. It might be difficult for beginners, but you can keep these things in mind for when you do get to that intermediate level. First, I studied what it is that I wanted to write. So for me, that was listening to Japanese songs and reading and translating lyrics myself. Maybe for you, this will be studying manga or watching Japanese YouTubers, depending on what your goal is. Some patterns that I found with song lyrics in Japanese are that the choruses are all the same melody and length, but are often different lyrics each time. Now this might change as what's popular changes, but I still see this a lot in Japanese music, and not very much in Western music. I ended up applying this to my own writing style, so rather than having repeated chorus, I usually have different lyrics each time. The next thing I noticed was the use of pronouns. Now Japanese rarely uses pronouns in real life situations. They're usually omitted, but obviously they're sometimes needed to tell a story in a song. Regardless of gender, anyone can use watashi or boku, or anata or kimi, or watashitachi or bokura. Songwriters tend to choose whichever fits the melody the best. So women will often use boku or bokura. I see watashi and kimi being used in the same song sometimes too, which wouldn't happen in a daily conversation. So I noticed these patterns and I started to use them in my own songs. If you, for example, wanted to make vlogs in Japanese, then you might watch vlogs by Japanese YouTubers and notice what they say in their intros, how they ask people to subscribe, in general, how the flow of the video goes. The obvious first step to writing a specific type of Japanese is to study that. The first step to writing a specific type of Japanese is to study that as much as you can. Next, I use a few different methods to check my lyrics as I try to write them for the first time. I think these are things that can help anyone to get a better understanding of Japanese and study more effectively. The first part of writing lyrics for me is making sure that I know what all the words I'm trying to use mean. I have a few things that I do to help me with that. One is using Google Images or whatever search engine you like's image search feature. This can be helpful when you're studying Japanese and see a word you haven't seen before or trying to understand exactly what a word means. A lot of times textbooks, JLPT prep books, are especially guilty of this. They'll simply have a word like W-I-N-D and you're not really sure, is that like weather, wind, or the verb wind, or to get wind of something. And sometimes there's words for things you don't have in your country. So using Google Images will help clear up a lot of the confusion, and you might even get to see it being used. Like maybe there will be a Japanese person's blog that uses that picture, and you'll have a better understanding of the word. I use this a lot when I'm trying to put some more poetic words into my lyrics, just to make sure that I know how to use them correctly. An example might be komorebi or sakura fubuki, which both have English translations that aren't super clear. But when you look them up in Google Images, you can clearly see the imagery that these words create. Two, I use online dictionaries and look at example sentences to figure out how to use a word or phrase. I use primarily 3 websites. One is Weblio, which is for Japanese people studying English, so it usually has a natural way to say things in Japanese that you're used to saying in English. The second one I use is jisho.org. This is for Japanese language learners. They have a lot of natural sounding example sentences. And thirdly, I also use just a normal Japanese online dictionary. I'll just put the word plus imi into Google. Reading the definition of a Japanese word in Japanese and seeing the real example sentences being used natively is the best way I found to get a complete understanding of it, and I sometimes cross-reference with the 2 other dictionaries. The next part of writing lyrics for me is figuring out how to best say something in Japanese that I first think up in English. So most of the time when I write Japanese songs, I first think it in Japanese and write it down in Japanese. But occasionally I'll think up a line in English and I want to say that in Japanese, but in the most natural sounding way. And there are 2 things that I do to help me with this. First is a website called Lingua. You can input a Japanese word or phrase and it'll show you passages from websites where it's being used. This is helpful when it comes to grammar, especially when a word has more than one meaning, like yurusu, for example. Okay, so yurusu, you can see here, it says permit, allow, forgive, release, excuse from, let off, give up, approve, tolerate, confide in, yield, pardon. So yurusu is a word that has a lot of meanings in English, and you can see that here too. Here, it says allows, right? And then here, yurusu kagiri, permits, as time permits. Here you have forgiving, forgive. I like Lingua because a lot of the passages are professional translations to Japanese from English and the reverse, so you can see how people interpret meaning. Another example would be deserve in English, which doesn't really have an exact Japanese translation. The nuance is different. So using Lingua, you can see the different ways that deserve is translated. The next thing I like to do when I'm unsure about the best way to phrase or write something is to use lyric translations. So I think about something that I want to say or something similar to what I want to say. And if I can think of a song that has lyrics similar to that, I look up the fan-translated Japanese lyrics. Shun-chan. So for example, maybe I want to know how to say remember me. And I know that Taylor Swift has a song that says the line, say you'll remember me. So I'm curious about how people translate that line. Swift, wildest dreams. And then I'm going to put kashi, lyrics, Japanese translation, like so. Okay, and enter. And if you see here, there's a lot of different ones. So these are all fan translated. Okay, so the first one by Choco Mint. Okay, so say you'll remember me. 綺麗なドレスを着ていた私を思い出すって言って. So 言って is say. So say, the memory of me in a nice dress will come to your mind. Okay, then this one, this is an Amoeba blog. 君のことを忘れないよって言って. Say, once again, 言って, say that you won't forget me, which, while is a different translation than this one, it's the same meaning but different way to say it. Okay, then this song, lyrics.net, 私を覚えているって言って. I think this is grammatically a little bit strange, actually, but anyway, so this is 言って, and then say that you are remembering me, basically. 私 is a kind of feminine way to say okay, and then this last one, lyriku, 覚えておくって言って. So once again, 言って. So same 覚える. This one also had 覚える. So literally remember, say you'll remember me. So what we can take from these different translations is that, first of all, that there's many different ways to say the same thing and that it doesn't translate exactly. But also, you have a lot of words to work with if you're trying to write creatively. If I wanted to say remember me, then I would look at, okay, 思い出す, what does this word mean? And figure that out. And then here, 忘れないよ, what does that mean? Look it up. And then 覚える. Considering there's so many ways to say the same thing when going from English to Japanese, it's up to me to figure out what would work best for my creative writing project. 痛いんですけど. You could also look up movie, anime, or TV show quotes. If something isn't very popular in Japan, it might not show up. There might not be a translation. But this is a fun way to see how people put their own creative touch onto translation, and it's a great active study method. The last thing I do after I've mostly finished writing a song or poem is to check my grammar. To do this, I go into Google and I put a line that I'm unsure about in quotations and search. So for example, あの人がいた冬に戻りたい. So first, I'm going to put the line that I wrote exactly as is and enter. And no results, which makes sense. So the next thing I'm going to do is take away the last part and see if there's any results. None. Okay, take away that. Okay, none. So, here. Okay, so あの人がいた夏. Okay, so this is reassuring. My line, it's a line of a poem, is あの人がいた冬. And this is あの人がいた夏. So it's a season. As long as this entry is correct, then maybe I'm correct. What I'm looking for is あの人がいた plus noun. あの人がいた時代は. So this is also noun. So I can figure that probably this part of it is correct. Next thing I'm going to do, so I change this to がいた夏に戻りたい. So 夏 seems to be more commonly used. 君がいた 夏に戻りたい. These are lyrics to a song actually. So, okay. 冬に戻りたい comes up. So, I'll change this 冬 to another season. I could change this verb into something similar. This is kind of how you can sort of see if it's maybe right or not. My husband, who is Japanese, said that even if there's a lot of search results, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct, because even native speakers, and often native speakers, make grammar mistakes. I think this is true, but it at least helps give me an idea about whether or not my phrasing is unnatural, if I've made a major spelling or grammar mistake. And after all that, I have my new song or poem written. I'm sure I still have some mistakes somewhere sometimes, or at least unnatural sounding phrasing. I'm not a native speaker, so of course that will happen. But I also think that when I'm writing creatively, it's art, right? So it's okay to be a little bit different. In addition to all the suggestions I have for writing in Japanese creatively, I think the best thing to do would be to just start writing. Social media can be good practice for this. You can follow Japanese people on social media, leave comments on Japanese YouTubers' videos or their Instagrams. Try to use Japanese when you post on your own account. Even if you're not perfect at first or make mistakes, people will always appreciate kind comments, and you'll be able to see natural native Japanese being used. And you might even get a reply or make a friend online. So whatever it is that you want to do, whatever you want to write, just start and do it as much as you can. That would be my biggest recommendation. I'm interested to hear from anyone who writes creatively in Japanese. If there's anything that you do that I haven't mentioned, or if you do try some of these methods, please let me know what you think of them. Thank you for watching. I'll be posting more Japanese related videos in the future, so I hope to see you again. Bye. Bye. Lija, bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye. Button.
ばあちゃん
行く
もうばあちゃんから帰ってきたよ今しゅんちゃん